Good? Alright, nice. Yeah, so here's just the announcements. We have, starting from next week, we have Olin 255. There will also be no class next week because of fall break. Um, and also, the homework 3 is due on the 16th. So, let's go over some intents. Let's just do a little bit of reviewing of what we learned on Monday. So for intent, what are they used for? Well, they are used to be able to communicate between your app's components as well as outside of your app. And explicits are used to communicate with apps outside, and explicits are used to communicate with apps within your app, and implicits are used to communicate outside of your app. So this is the syntax for doing an explicit intent. So just a reminder, we create an intent, we put the data that we want to send into our next component, and then we actually pass intent by doing this start activity. And on the other side, we get that information through this get intent, get extra, get string. Next, implicit intent. These are requests to perform specific actions that other apps can perform. This could be taking a photo. This could be getting the directions to, let's just say, Olin Hall, right? Or starting a phone call. These are just ways to request other apps to do functionality for you. And because most of the time they will have better functionality and they'll have a better interface for doing the things that you want it to do. So it makes it so that you can code less and give the user a better experience. Next, for implicit intents, there is the reminder that when you make an implicit intent, sometimes it requires you to give it extra information. Here for an email, well, you have to tell it who to send the email to, what is the subject, what is the body. Say you want to go to a specific location, well, you have to give the intent the address so that it actually knows where you want to go on Google Maps, for example. So for results from activities, this is sort of like a contract. Once I finish performing this action, I want to be able to actually get the results back. Say, for example, I call the camera app to help me take a profile pic. Well, afterwards, I want to get that photo so I can within my app, and this is what this does. It makes it so that I have a contract with my intent, so that after it's finished, its activity, I can get the product or the photo or the string or the image that I want back from the original activity. Next, we have manifest. Manifest is where all of your information will be put about your app. It talks about where your main activity is and what actually appears on screen when you start it up. It contains the permissions. And as a general rule of thumb, all of this will be automatically generated as you create more and more activities and as you create more and more components. However, it is important to remember because, say for example, you want to do a wide scale change on your app, this is the place to go. Next, permissions. So for permissions, you have to remember that there are dangerous permissions, permissions that impede on the privacy of the user. And because of that, you have to ask the user permission before you gain access to it. For example, location, the use for internet, storage, access to their storage, as well as their camera. And you should use permissions sparingly. You should make it so that you should only request permissions when it's absolutely necessary within your app. And another thing that's important is that, say for example, the user has denied the use of your permission. You have to make it so that your app still functions and has a workflow to deal with the fact that your user may or may not accept all of your permissions. So here, for example, if you really need them to have this permission, you want it so that they can keep on retrying. You can keep on prompting them to give you permission before you actually allow them to use the app. This is the graphic of when you should ask for permissions, right? If you need to, you should ask, mostly. Right? Otherwise, you shouldn't. Oops. So, for the syntax on how we will ask for permissions, just remember, we are going to be using a library. And for a library, we need to do is actually import it into our code through our dependencies. And the way we put this in is by putting this line of code within the dependencies in between these two brackets in our build.gradle. As you build more and more apps and bigger and bigger apps, you will have to import more and more dependencies. So a lot of times they make your life incredibly easy, or easier than trying to code everything by yourselves. And so for the syntax for permissions is as so, right? You will be overriding the what's it called, Android default permission writing by using this default code that we have given you. Afterwards, you want to actually request these permissions within your manifest. So something that's important, you have to request it within your manifest as well as your code. Afterwards, we also have to make sure that you need to make a unique request code for each permission so that afterwards, when you try to request it, you can actually like request the right, what's it called? You can request the correct permissions. These are just things you have to do due to the fact that we're using this specific library. Next, you want to actually, let's say you want to actually do things after the permission has been granted. What you want to do is have this after permission granted. So this will only run after your permissions have been granted. So just a reminder, the syntax is tricky. There is a lot of it. There's a lot of things to remember, as well as here we have to do a bunch of codes. Here we have to put in the manifest. You don't have to memorize all of it. The syntax is in the textbook and within the slides. So make sure to use all your resources and don't try to do everything off the top of your head, because we don't even do this. Now, time for a little demo slash discussion. So today we will be creating a location grabber. It's very, very simple. What we want to do, what we want you guys to do, is to make this screen. What you want is when you click this button, you ask for the user for the permission to use their specific, precise location. Afterwards, after they've granted this permission, you will display their longitude and latitude of their location on screen, and that is it. Right? So hopefully you guys get to work. We will be slowly showing you guys how to do it later on, but we want you guys to actually try to do this by yourselves. Right? If you have questions, you can ask Justin and I. So get to it.
All right, once everybody's pretty much done making the screen, we will move on to at least going through the steps of asking for permissions, since that is something that homework 3 will be asking of you, and it is kind of a convoluted process, and so we wanted to walk you through the general flow of asking for permissions. So yeah, once everybody's done, give us a thumbs up and we can move on.
Shouldn't we allow them to try and do permission on that?
Yeah, definitely. You can go through like steps. I can just like show the steps.
After 20 minutes. I mean, show them to open. Like last minutes. Patient friendly.
I think most of this should be pretty simple. It's just like the
I like better to
yeah, I guess so. This is it's awkward. Wait, I remember we've always taught the classic conflict. Happen, bro. So how much more we let's go. I feel like this specific discussion is more important than actually going. Yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions if you guys are stuck. That's what we were here for. oh, okay.
example, or get the photo back. But say, for example, this request for permission. Yeah, pretty much. Oh no, just like text. Oh yeah. I guess for the moment. Um, pretty sure the reason why. You know the result from activity can request for permissions. Yes. In the textbook, the result, like the just went down over. Yeah. Like the result, they can request for permissions. It's in the textbook. I don't remember this at all.
So it's from like the thing with intent can request for permission.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Right here. It's request for permissions.
Well, yeah, there is another way to do it. I remember trying to do this general flow, and I've found that the other way.
We should just do easy setup, right?
Yeah, the easy permission stuff is easier. And these are just kind of crazy and a lot of. Okay. Yeah, I generally like I used this for the demo today, and it was generally. But I guess yeah, it doesn't matter which way you use it as long as it works.
Okay. I was like looking at this.
Yeah, I have no idea.
So this is like the hardware version, then, right?
Yeah, generally. Because like, what is even happening here? Like the flow is just very obscure. Yeah, just for now, that's all. And
If you want to go ahead.
yeah, so we will hopefully by the end of this be able to walk through the process of requesting for permissions, specifically the location permission, obviously, the two fine location and course locations that we'll need for this. And we'll pretty much just be walking through the slides again so that you guys can go through them, put them in your code, get it all working, get the permissions flow working at the very least. And hopefully we'll be able to also, if we have time, make it actually display what the latitude and longitude is. Yeah. Okay, what's the progress looking on the screen? Anybody need extra time? Like repeatedly denies permissions, it's very obscure onto how exactly to work out those scenarios. But the other library we feel makes it a lot more clear, and so we'll be using this library, easy permissions. And so the first step is to add this dependency to your build.gradle, and that will be in your Gradle scripts down here, inside of build.gradle. You'll see that there are two of them. One of them is very short, and generally you're not going to be interacting with that one. And then the other one is where most of your actual changes will occur, and so you'll want to add that line around here, just anywhere inside of this dependencies area. Yeah. Okay, has everybody got that line down? Okay, so whenever you edit your build.gradle, you will have to sync your Gradle file with the project. And so I kind of on autopilot did it, but it'll be around here. You'll see a little tab that says sync now, and just click that, and the build Gradle changes will propagate through your app. Be up here somewhere. Yeah, this is the line that you'll like, or that you'll want to add. Okay, everybody got this line? Okay, awesome. So next, this is actually in Kotlin, or this is actually in Java, but I have a actual correct Kotlin version of this pulled up. Let me just get that really quickly. The previous version, or like a very old version of this course, was taught in Java, and so this is just a little artifact of that. So let me pull this over instead. This is the function you'll want. It's pretty much just legitimately just a copy paste. You don't have to know what it does at all. It pretty much will override the general or the basic way of Android handling a permissions flow and use the easy permissions version instead. This should be in your textbook if you'd rather just copy paste it, unless that is also the Java version, in which case you can just kind of write it down from here. And this would you'd want to put this inside of your general main file, or your main activity Kotlin file as just like a function. as just any other function. Class shouldn't be. Is it giving you some sort of error? Yeah, this should just go inside of your main activity, so no need to make another class. Might as well pull this up in Android Studio. So I have this main activity file pulled up, and I would just copy paste it into here. Let me make that a little bit bigger. You'll have to import easy permissions as well. Okay, but yeah, this is the function that you'll want. And so this will override the default version of Android's requesting for permissions. I am trying to dim that light, but it doesn't seem like I can. Oh, there we go. Okay, awesome. Okay, everybody have this function thrown in there? Okay, cool. The next step is to actually specify which permissions that you'll want to be accessing. And so in this case, they put course location, find location, and read contacts. But in our case for this demo, we'll only need course and find location. And so these will be placed inside of your Android manifest.xml, which you will find in your project file, app manifest, Android manifest. And so you'll want to pretty much copy paste them over. Let me actually do that myself. Keep that up for you guys. I'm going to type that up. So yeah, if you have this pulled up, inside of your Android manifest, just outside of the application area, you'll just copy paste these two permissions in order to tell your project that you want to use the course location and find location. You need both of these. Pretty much, find location will be able or will enable you to access a more precise location, whereas coarse location is less definite. It's very general. But if we want the actual specific location in terms of latitude and longitude, final location is what we'll need, and you just also need to have coarse location as well in there. Okay, everybody have those permission lines put in the manifest? Awesome. Okay, move on to step 4, and so this is where we'll actually like start getting into the permissions flow inside of our Kotlin code. And so the first thing you'll want to do is create these sort of request codes for your permissions. And so these will let you actually work with your permissions and handle the permissions flow for certain permissions. So obviously you'll want to act differently if you have a like photos or like a camera's permission as opposed to like a locations permission. You want your code to do different things when those permissions are granted. And so these request codes will help us tell which permission was just granted or which permission was just denied. And so we can have react differently based off of those results. And the main way in Kotlin of doing this is actually making something called a companion object. Essentially what it is just kind of static fields inside of like a Java class. And so if you wanted to make a bunch of just a bunch of fields kind of lying around in the side of a class, you can make companion object and then just put a bunch of your fields here. So our code that we would want is, say, like request, location, permission, and we just set that to some value. So I'm just going to say 0. So this is something that you'll want to add. And again, we'll be using this this constant in order to differentiate which permission was actually granted. Of course, we only have one, and so I could have just say 0 and use that throughout my app. But if I wanted to add more permissions later on, then something like this is the model that you'd want to use. Okay, everybody have that? Okay, awesome. So step 4b is where the code will start getting a little interesting. Now, I'll try to break down this if statement for you guys. Pretty much all you would generally have to do is copy paste it. But the idea is the first line of my if statement, where my mouse go, will check for if the user has already granted the permission or not. And so if the user has granted the permission, you'll go into this else on the bottom. Otherwise, you want to request a permission, obviously, right? And so this line will have you do that. Easy permissions dot request permissions. You'll have to enter a couple of things. Your request code goes here, which is how you will differentiate between in your code which permission was just granted, and the other fields are just here. Your rationale, this parameter here, is also pretty important because it'll tell your user sort of information as to why your permission is needed when they deny your permission. So if they deny permission and your app is really relying on a location to be granted, then this rationale will pop up and tell them, hey, we really need this permission in order for our app to operate properly. And so that'll hopefully persuade your user to actually grant you the proper permission. Of course, here our request code doesn't necessarily say that. I think I put request location permission. Okay, I'll show you guys this in Android Studio now. This is the big if statement. You don't have to put this in onCreate as like a decision based off of design. This, in effect, will check for permissions right as you open the app or right as you open the activity, since this is in onCreate. But if we say wanted to check for this upon a button press, we could shove this inside of a set on click listener, for example. But just for now, we'll have this placed right inside of our onCreate. And so again, what this will do, if they don't have permissions, we'll request for it and say something like, oh, you need your locations permission in order for our app to work. Here inside the permissions, you actually delineate which permissions you need, as well as up here. Well, first of all, this is checking for if you have the permissions, find location and course location. If not, this will actually request for those. And so we can actually test that in just a second. Since it's in our onCreate, let me actually fire up my emulator here. This should, in theory, hopefully, as soon as we open our app, ask us for our permissions. Okay. If anyone's still trying to copy that down, I'll pull up my emulator to the side here. This is my working version, but that is interesting. I remember I got this error before, and I forgot how I fixed it. Oh yeah, it was something about the dependencies. How did I fix that? Check my search history because I did actually search this up before. Anybody else getting that error? Sorry about that, folks. Let me just search that up really quickly because I remember having this error before. Oh, for now, just changing the if statement to actually ask for permissions. I have an error with the build Gradle that I'm trying to debug right now. I forgot exactly why this was happening again. It seems we need another dependency. I think this is how I fixed it. If you try to build your app, you'll most likely get this error as well. And so I'm pretty sure the way to fix it is to add another dependency. I am honestly not too sure. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we do need this other dependency. And I'm not particularly sure why, but this is the solution I found earlier. And so once you're done with the if statement, also add this dependency. It doesn't really matter what version to your build.gradle. It's just a little workaround. I'm not particularly sure why this is being thrown in. That definitely shouldn't really be happening, but that is the fix. And let me just build that in the meantime. Oh yeah, and you will have to also sync your Gradle project again. So hopefully this build will work this time. And builds fine. Yeah, not sure exactly why we need the dependency, but seems like we do. So everybody has a dependency now. Yeah. Oh, yeah, what's up? Okay, so now hopefully if I actually start the app, it will correctly ask me for my permission this time. The app starts, and there we go. Asks me for my permissions. Because right away in my onCreate, I am asking them for my permissions, and of course I have not actually granted that to them yet, so it will go into this part of the if statement and thus request the permission. Can everybody confirm theirs is also doing that once they launch everything? Yeah, of course. Like this one highlighted right here. Got that down? Okay, awesome. Okay, anybody who has launched it and completed this, do you see the permissions being asked? Okay, awesome. So at the moment, I'm not actually going to click it because I would like to show off step 5 actually. Is it okay to move on to step 5 with everybody? Okay, awesome. So for step 5, this is sort of like an optional thing. You don't really need it, but you can make a function to trigger right as your permission is granted. AKA, if I were to go into my emulator and actually click like while using this app or only this time, then this function would fire. And the way it operates is off of, again, the request code. So whatever request code I put into here will correspond to the permission that was just granted. This is a little annotation after permission granted. You'll see like at override, that kind of stuff, similar annotations as well. This annotation makes it so whenever this permission is granted, the function will essentially fire. So I don't think that's supposed to say override. I don't think that will override anything. And if it doesn't, then it may throw an error. So you might have to get rid of override. But again, we use the after permission granted annotation with our request code and make our function. So let's take after location granted. Then you will do something. At the moment, we probably don't actually have to do anything, but let's say I wanted to debug and make sure that actually was happening. We could say permissions test granted, and fire up the emulator as well as logcat, looking for permissions test. I believe that's rebuilt. Actually, be frozen. There we go. Well, yeah, that's unfortunate. Let me fire up my other app. It was kind of forcing me to click it, so I couldn't show off clicking it for the first time. So let me just fire up the other emulator I have, which is on this page, and for some reason does not have a border. It just looks like a rectangle. Hopefully that doesn't take too long. Yeah, technically for the purposes of our app here, we will not really need to do anything once, or like as soon as it's granted. We will prefer to wait until the button is pressed to actually do anything with our permission. Hopefully our emulator pops up soon. Okay, and so it's asking us, this is not the right debugger process. There we go. So hopefully now, if I say it while using the app, there we go. This function fired and said that our location was granted. Awesome. Okay, so we are a little low on time at this point, and so I will kind of run through the rest with actually sort of getting the location. And of course, this demo code will be posted later, because this is stuff that you will be doing pretty similar stuff with your homework. And so we would like to show it off on exactly how to do it. Come on, give me my import. There we go. So let's make a set on click listener. And so when my on click listener is pressed, I want to say like request the location from my phone, because a location isn't necessarily stored consistently, and if I ever want to get the location, I have to sort of request it and then wait a little bit until it actually appears. And so the way that we found is best to do this is with something called location manager. And so in order to get one, you just say val location manager equals get system service context dot location service as, which is basically a cast, to local manager, or location manager, my bad. To import that most likely. And now we have a location manager, and with this we should be able to actually pull our location from our user. And so we can say location manager dot get current location. Provider, there are a couple different ways to actually get the location. The way that works with both the emulator and a physical phone is location manager dot GPS provider. And you have to pass in something else, some other things. Don't worry about what I'm even typing, because this is essentially just a copy paste at this point. Oops, application. Trust me, I don't even know what this thing is, but don't worry about it. And so next, once your current location is gotten, you need to pass a function to it to actually tell it what to do with that location, because this doesn't necessarily happen right off the bat, and it might take a little while in order for you to, location to actually happen. At this point, it's going to give me an error because it's technically unsafe for me to even be saying this, because what if, say, the user hasn't granted me the permission, then this won't fire. One thing you can do is just go with what their little suggestion was. If you roll over it, it'll say add permission check. This will essentially just put in a big block of code that guarantees that, well, I guess the way I'd probably want to do it is else this stuff. Since this isn't its own function, I can't just return. But anyways, this will basically say if my permission is not granted, this stuff else. So I know at this point my permission is granted. So you can just use that little annotation there, and the error will go away. I can also format so it doesn't look as terrible. And so now into the important stuff. The location is sort of passed here as a variable, and the default name for it is it. I don't know if you can see this right here, but it is called it. You can name it something that you prefer by just typing the name of it and an arrow. So now my location parameter technically is called location, and I can now use that. So if I wanted to change my latitude text, I could, well, first of all, get a reference to that. We'll just do latitude in the sake of time. I've called it lat myself. Oops, by ID. And in order to pull out the latitude, you can just say location dot latitude, and we'll just say that's toString. Let's see if I decide to click on this button, if it will at least fill in the latitude. It'll probably overwrite the entire thing, but no worries. It's actually just one. I think it should take a second. Yeah, there we go. And therefore, afterwards, it will actually populate my location text, or my latitude text, with the correct latitude. Obviously not formatted. Maybe if I wanted to, I could say latitude, and then append that as its string. But yeah, that's the general way you would pull latitude. We could do the same thing for longitude. And just keep in mind that the way that we've structured it here is not the only way you can do it. Again, we ask for permissions as soon as the app was opened. You don't have to do that. You can put this if statement and the request permissions pretty much anywhere in your app. You could request it on, say, the button press as well. There's absolutely no need. You'd have to do it on the creation of the app. It's very flexible, and so that's why we prefer this easy permissions way of doing things. But yeah, that is pretty much the demo. I won't bore you with the details with doing it with longitude as well, but that is the gist of it all. This demo code will be posted. Sorry for going a little bit over time, but we wanted you guys to really get most of this onto your demos, onto your own computers, because the whole permissions flow is kind of convoluted. And trust me, I had a lot of difficulty with just handling permissions on my own when I was going through the homeworks over the summer as well. So we really wanted to give you guys a more concrete way of doing it. Yeah, this whole thing is a mess. But anyways, that is pretty much all for the demo for today. Thank you all for coming, and have a good night. It is a very late time slot as always. See you guys in Olin 255, not Thursday. Not next week either. Next 2 weeks.